All right, guys, so today we are going to be talking about factoring polynomials. And the last couple of years, the way that we have done this is we've shown students like 4 different ways of factoring polynomials. And sometimes one method would work better than the others. And other times a different method would work. And it kind of came down to, well, which method do you like the best? And one thing that I've noticed is the same method keeps coming back. The method that most students liked to use was the same one. Everyone kind of kept picking the same thing. And not only that, but the method that they were using kind of worked in lots of different situations. It fit most of the time. So what we're going to do this year, we're going to do things a little bit different. Rather than teaching you 4 different ways of factoring polynomials, we're just going to teach you one. I'm just going to focus really heavily on one method that works almost all of the time and try to get you to understand that method really, really well so that you get better at doing this. So what we're talking about when we're talking about factoring polynomials, right here I have a polynomial. This is what we call a quadratic. And all that means is that there is a square. There's an x squared. So that makes it a quadratic equation or a quadratic polynomial. And this kind of polynomial has 3 terms. So we actually call it a trinomial, okay? Because it's got 1, 2, 3 terms. Now, if you notice, the x squared is going to be a variable. My x is also a variable, but I've got these other 2 letters out here in front, the b and the c. These could be any different number. This b could be a 5 or a 6 or 182 or a -4. And this c, just like the b, can be a lot of different numbers. But the x and the x squared are always going to be the same. Now, this first method, if you notice, there's nothing in front of x squared. Sometimes there's a number in front of x squared, and we usually call that one a. In this case, there is no a in front of x squared. It's just x squared by itself. Now, this first method, what we're going to do, I'm going to try my best to kind of keep the steps color coordinated. But the first thing that I guess what we're trying to do, maybe that's where we should start, is right now we have a polynomial. And when we're done, we want it to look more like this. We're kind of unfoiling these polynomials. This is what it would look like after you performed FOIL on 2 sets of parentheses. Well, we want to go backwards. We want to undo that, which is a little bit harder than just factoring out one number, because usually you've got 2 things going on in these parentheses. So what we're trying to do is figure out, we know that there's an x at the front of each of these parentheses. We just don't know what comes with it. We don't know if it's a +2 and a -4. That's what we're trying to figure out. So step 1 is going to be to set up your parentheses. So the first thing that you're going to do is set up your parentheses with those variables in front, with those x's at the front, okay? So those variables are going to be in the front. Now, as we do these steps, I'm going to try and do them down here. So this example says r squared plus 4r plus 3. Don't freak out that these aren't x's. They're just variables. We treat them the same way. But I'm going to start by setting up my 2 parentheses, and I'm going to put my r and my r at the front of each. Okay? Easy first step. I don't think very many of you can mess that one up. Now, what we're going to be doing, we call this the x method. Is kind of how you'll hear it referred to. We call this the x method. And basically what we're trying to do is we want to set up this x. We want to set up this x, this big X. And the way that we're going to set it up is I'm going to take my c value, whatever c is, and I'm going to put it right here on top. And I'm going to take my b value, and I'm going to put my b value here on the bottom. So whatever c is goes on top, whatever b is, and be careful that you include that sign in front of it, if in case it's a negative. Whatever those values are, you put them in the top and the bottom. So you're going to set up your x, And you're going to ask yourself a question, what we're looking for, and maybe let's do that down here. So this 3 is going to go on top, and this 4 is going to go here on the bottom. Okay, and you're going to ask yourself a question. I'm going to put 3 on top, 4 on bottom, and I'm going to ask, what multiples what multiplies to C? What multiplies to my C number and adds up to be my B number? So I want to know what multiplies to C, what multiplies to equal this number, and what adds up to B. So I'm looking for 2 numbers. And in our example here, we kind of picked a nice one to start with. I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to be 3. Well, the truth is there's only 2 things that you can multiply together to be 3. And that's a +1 and a +3. 1 times 3 is 3. I guess technically we could do -1 multiplied by -3 as well. But -1 times -3 doesn't add up to 4. It adds up to -4. So what I want is my +1 and my +3. They multiply to 3. They add up to 4. So I'm going to write the +1 on the left, and I'm going to write the +3 on the right. So we're looking for what adds up to the bottom and multiplies to be up there on the top. Okay. Well, I guess I kind of did step 3 right there, is I solved it. So step 2 is really just putting the 3 and the 4 in place. Step 3 here would be solving that X puzzle, is figuring out what values go there. So maybe I should change this to a red 1 and a red 3 so that you can see that. So I was looking for what multiplies to 3 and adds up to 4. You've got to be really careful. A couple of hints here. You need to watch your signs, which we kind of did here, because -1 and -3 multiply to be a +3. But when you add them together, you don't get a +4, you get a negative. So you got to be careful about that. Now, what's really nice about this is once you know what these 2 numbers are, all you have to do is put your answers in the parentheses. So I know that one of them is a +1, so I'm going to put that right here. And I know the other one is a +3, and I'm going to put that one right there. Step 4 is you can check your work, okay? We can check our work here by doing FOIL. So I can take this and I can FOIL it out and see if I end up where I started. See if I get back to r squared plus 4r plus 3. So if I do FOIL, r times r, that's r squared. R times 3 is a plus 3r. 1 times r is a plus 1r. 1 times 3 is plus 3. And when I simplify, I end up with r squared plus 4r plus 3, which is where I started. So this is the correct factorization right here. That would be my correct answer, r plus 1 and r plus 3. Okay, now that was a really basic example. They're not always that easy. There's a lot of times there's other things to worry about. So let's look at, let's just do a couple more examples. We've got plenty of time. You're welcome to fast forward at any point if you've got everything figured out, but stick around for at least a couple of these. So let's say that we have x squared plus 20x. Let's just jump right in and let's pick some bigger numbers, plus 99. And I'm going to draw my x here. Now, step 1 was to write my x's in my parentheses. Step 2 was to set up my x. So remember, C goes right here on top, and B goes down here on the bottom. Remember, the top, I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to equal the top and add up to equal the bottom. Now, this might be a little bit more complicated because there's more than the options we had before. 99, well, I mean, you could do 99 and 1. Those aren't going to add up to 20 for sure. You could do 33 and 3. Those aren't going to add up to 20. How about when I see a 9 and a 9 next to each other, I think of 11s. How about 11 and 9? Those do add up to be 20. So those are what I'm going to put here on the side. I'm going to put an 11 and a 9. And they're both positive because they multiply to be a positive and add up to be a positive. Now all I have to do is plug them in. Plus 11, plus 9. And I'm done. I can check my work. I can go ahead and FOIL and work backwards and see if I get to the same place, which I will. So my answer is going to be x plus 11 and x plus 9. Okay. Let's look at some examples where my numbers maybe aren't as, instead of all these positives. Let's do something like n squared minus 10n, and let's start here. Let's do plus 24. So when I draw my parentheses, instead of x's, I'm using n's. And then I'm going to draw my x. And my 24 goes on top. Remember, that's what multiplies to be the top. Negative 10 is going to go on the bottom. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to a positive, but when you add them together, you get a negative. Well, two numbers that multiply to a positive, you have two options. Either they're both positive or they're both negative. And if my numbers are adding up to be a negative 10, then that means both of my numbers are going to be negative when they multiply to be 24. So a lot of people, the first thing that they're going to say, I can tell you right now, they're going to say, oh, 12 and 2. Because 12 and 2, if this is negative, that adds up to 10. Well, yeah, but I don't want negative 10. Or I don't want 10, I want negative 10. Oh, well, then this is positive and this is negative. That adds up to negative 10. That's true, but negative 12 times positive 2 is not positive 24. It's negative 24. So we got to be really careful with these factors. We know that they're both negatives because they multiply to a positive, add up to a negative. So 12 and 2 doesn't work. How about 8 and 3? That's not going to work either because, again, they're both supposed to be negative, and that's going to be negative 11. So how about negative 4 and negative 6? Negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24. Negative 4 plus negative 6 is negative 10. So I know I can put a negative 4 and a negative 6 right in the parentheses. If I want to FOIL and check my work, I can. I'm not going to take time to do so on the video, but that would probably be a good idea as you're doing your homework or doing a test. Okay. Let's do some more examples. At least one more. How about we go with x squared minus 12x minus 28. I like this example because we've got to be really careful with our signs. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm looking for what goes in my parentheses with my x's. So I'm going to draw my big X here, and the negative 28 is going to go on top. So I'm looking for things that multiply to negative 28, and the negative 12 is going to go there on the bottom. So I'm looking for numbers that add up to negative 12, but they have to multiply to a negative 28. Now, if two numbers multiply to be a negative, that means one of them is negative and one of them is positive. Because they both can't be negative, they both can't be positive. So one is negative and one is positive. And this number right here gives me a hint, because when I add the numbers together, I'm going to get a negative, which means my biggest number is going to be my negative number, because my final answer is going to be negative 12. So it's going to be, the negative number is going to be bigger. So 28, what goes into 28? The first thing it's even. So how about 2 and 14? Well, the bigger number is the negative. So the 14 is going to go here and the 2 would go here. Negative 14 plus 2 is negative 12. So those look like they might be the right answer. Negative 14 and a positive 2. If I want to check my work, I can FOIL, check my work, and find out that that's correct. Okay. Now, what if I lied. I'm going to do one more example. Because what if I have the same thing, the x squared, but instead of a negative 12x, what if it was a positive 12x minus 28? Now, this time, I've got numbers that I'm going to erase a little bit of this so that we can see, so that I just have a little bit more room to work. I guess I could have just scrolled down. So I'm looking for numbers that, when I set up my x here, I'm looking for numbers that multiply to negative 28. Remember, the top is the multiply, and the 12 goes on the bottom. I'm looking for numbers that multiply to negative 28, but they add up to a positive 12. Well, again, I'm going to have a negative and a positive. There's no other option, because when I multiply them together, I get a negative number. But this time, when I add these two numbers together, I'm going to end up with a positive 12. What that means is that my bigger number is going to be the positive, because it's going to end up at a positive 12. So if I start looking at factors of 28, how about 4? 4 and 7. So that means that the 7 would be positive, the 4 would be the negative, but those don't add up to a positive 12. But last time I tried 2 and I tried 14, right? So 14 would be my positive, 2 would be my negative. 14 plus a negative 2 or minus 2, that adds up to 12. And those multiply to negative 28. So this time, I get x minus 2 and x plus 14, which is different than what I got last time. So we've got to be careful that we pay attention to the signs, okay?